In his sleek downtown Chicago office, Wyatt leaned back in his plush leather chair, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. He couldn't stop marveling at how his restaurant, the Windy Fork, had become the talk of the city. It was a shining star in Chicago's food scene, drawing crowds from Lincoln Park to Hyde Park. The secret? A killer menu of farm-to-table dishes like smoked brisket sandwiches and truffle fries, a tight-knit team of pros, and an ambiance that made every guest feel like royalty. Wyatt's mind drifted to the long road that led him here, a journey spanning over 2 decades, starting in the gritty 90s during the infamous 1995 heat wave. Back then, Chicago's restaurant game was cutthroat. Wyatt had to make snap decisions, take big risks to survive. He thought fondly of his grandpa, George T. Harrison, who'd been his rock. George, well into his 70s, made a bold move. He sold the family cabin in Saugatuck by Lake Michigan and handed Wyatt the cash. "We don't need that old place anymore," George had said, his eyes twinkling. "I see a fire in you, kid. You're built for this." That money was the spark for Wyatt's dream. He started small, opening a taco stand at a bustling South Side market, then a cozy diner near Union Station. Through sweat and grit, he grew his empire. Now, the Windy Fork boasted a James Beard-nominated chef from New Orleans, and its rooftop patio was booked months in advance. Every choice, every late night, had paid off, turning Wyatt's vision into a reality. His thoughts were interrupted by hushed voices outside his door. Sarah, a server, was venting to a co-worker about an older woman who kept hanging around the restaurant, bugging the staff. Wyatt glanced out his window and spotted her on the sidewalk. She looked worn down, tattered clothes, unkempt silver hair, and a weary face that made her seem older than she probably was. She stood there, staring hungrily at the diners, savoring their artisanal burgers, her throat bobbing as she swallowed hard. A soft knock broke the moment. Sarah poked her head in, her face tight with worry. "Wyatt, that homeless woman's back again," she said, her voice shaky, Wyatt's jaw clenched. "Where's security? Isn't this their job?" he asked, frustration creeping in. Another server, Mia, chimed in from the doorway. "They tried shooing her away, but she keeps coming back," she said, exasperated. Wyatt sighed. The last thing he needed was this woman scaring off his upscale clientele. Diners wrinkled their noses when they saw her. It was killing the vibe. He grabbed his phone and called the Chicago PD, asking them to handle it discreetly. Within minutes, officers arrived, gently escorted the woman into a squad car, and drove off without a scene. Wyatt watched, his mind wandering to his past, wondering what had brought her to this point. As Wyatt watched the squad car pull away from the Windy Fork, his thoughts drifted to his childhood in a modest bungalow on Chicago's west side. He was only 5 when his dad, Ethan, died in a bridge collapse, leaving a void that never filled. His mum, Clara, vanished soon after, abandoning him to a haze of grief. Wyatt's grandparents, George Harrison and Evelyn, stepped in, raising him with tough love and big dreams. They'd spin vague stories about Clara moving to some far-off place. But young Wyatt clung to hope she'd return, scribbling letters to the Chicago PD begging for help finding her. Those letters always came back, stamped undeliverable, handed to Grandpa George, a municipal clerk at City Hall. When the family planned to move to a bigger house in Oak Park, 10-year-old Wyatt panicked. "What if Mom comes back and I'm not here?" he'd sobbed, his voice breaking. George hugged him tight. "We'll always be your home, kiddo," he said, his voice steady and warm. The pain lingered, but life moved on. By his teens, Wyatt buried those memories under school, sports, and a job at a Chicago-style hot dog joint. Then, one argument changed everything. Evelyn, fed up with Wyatt's questions about Clara, snapped. "She's gone, Wyatt. Probably passed out drunk in some alley," she shouted, her voice raw with pain. George gasped, scolding her. "Evie, not like that. Not in front of him," he urged, his tone sharp. Evelyn turned away, tears streaming, muttering, "I can't keep lying. It's tearing me apart." Wyatt stood frozen, his world shattered. George pulled him close, whispering apologies, promising they'd always have his back, but the damage was done. Clara's memory faded, replaced by Wyatt's drive to build something of his own. George stayed his biggest cheerleader, using every connection to help Wyatt's taco stand grow into the Windy Fork. When Wyatt opened his first real restaurant, George and Evelyn were frail, passing away just as the place took off. Now, at 50, Wyatt had everything. A thriving business, a loving wife, Lily, and 2 great kids, Ethan Jr. and Olivia. He'd named his son after his dad, but naming his daughter after Clara felt wrong, too raw. Lily suggested Olivia, a name they both loved. Ethan Jr. was now engaged to a sweet girl from Evanston, and Wyatt and Lily were daydreaming about grandkids. Family meant everything to Wyatt, just as much as his restaurant empire. The next morning, Wyatt arrived at the Windy Fork early, planning a quick check of the kitchen and stockroom. Near the back alley, he froze. The new janitor, Anna, was sharing a sandwich with the same homeless woman from yesterday, in the same worn coat. Anna's eyes widened when she saw Wyatt. "I'm sorry, Wyatt, I didn't mean to mess up, honest," she stammered, her voice trembling. Wyatt's temper flared, his voice low but sharp. "What's going on here, Anna? You know this could tank our open table reviews," he snapped, his frustration boiling over. He pictured influencers and food critics spotting this scene, their posts torching his life's work. Wyatt's heart pounded. He glared at Hannah, the janitor, who stood frozen in the alley behind the Windy Fork, a half-eaten sandwich in her hand. The homeless woman beside her, frail in her worn coat, looked up with tired eyes. Wyatt's mind raced. Years of building his Chicago restaurant's reputation could unravel if a food blogger snapped a photo of this scene. "Hannah, you realize this could tank us, right?" he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut through the morning chill. Hannah's face flushed, her words tumbling out. "I just felt bad for her, Wyatt. I brought this from home, I swear," she pleaded. Wyatt barely heard her. His thoughts screamed about health code violations, snarky open-table reviews. He turned to the woman, his frustration boiling over. "You can't keep coming back here," he barked, snatching the sandwich from Hannah's hand and tossing it toward the woman. It landed in the gravel, crumbs scattering. "Get out and don't show up again," he shouted. Hannah gasped, clutching her apron. The woman knelt slowly, picking up the sandwich and brushing off the dirt. "Please, don't be mad at her," she said softly, her voice steady despite Wyatt's outburst. "She's just being kind." Wyatt's scowl deepened, but her words hit hard. He froze as she added, "A little bread gets you through tough times." His breath caught. That phrase, it was something his mom Clara used to say when he'd come home scraped up from bike crashes in Garfield Park. "Where'd you hear that?" Wyatt demanded, his voice low, almost trembling. The woman blinked, surprised. "Just something I've always said. I'm Lorraine," she replied. Wyatt's pulse quickened. Lorraine. His mom's middle name was Lorraine. Could it be? He stared at her weathered face, searching for traces of the vibrant woman he barely remembered. His anger fizzled, replaced by a gnawing unease. Wyatt's chest tightened, his mum's voice echoing in his head. "Wait," he said, softer now. "Come inside. Let's talk." Hannah and Lorraine exchanged stunned glances. Moments ago, Wyatt had been a storm of rage. Now he was offering compassion. "I owe you an apology," Wyatt added, gesturing toward the restaurant's back door. "Let me make it right with some breakfast." The kitchen staff gawked as Wyatt led Lorraine to a booth near the vintage jukebox, whispering to a server to bring coffee, pancakes, and a deep-dish pizza-inspired frittata. Wyatt sat across from her, his mind a tangle of doubt and hope. Was this really his mum? He hadn't seen her since he was 5, but that saying about bread, it was too specific, too personal. "Lorraine, do you have family?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Her eyes clouded. "Had a son once, and a husband, Ethan. But life, it broke us apart," she said, her voice trembling. Wyatt's heart lurched. Ethan, his dad's name. He leaned closer, hanging on her every word, desperate to untangle the truth from this stranger who felt so familiar. Wyatt sat across from Lorraine in the booth at the Windy Fork, the hum of the vintage jukebox fading as her story poured out. Her voice, soft but heavy with pain, pulled him into a past that felt eerily like his own. Lorraine spoke of her son, little Wyatt, and her husband Ethan, who died in a Chicago construction accident. She'd been a cashier at a Jewel Osco in Pilsen, scraping by to keep their family afloat. Then tragedy struck again. After Ethan passed, Lorraine said, her eyes distant, his parents, my in-laws, came knocking. They demanded I hand over Wyatt, said they'd raise him better. I told them no chance, he's my kid. Wyatt's hands tightened around his coffee mug, his heart racing. What happened next? He asked, barely breathing. Lorraine's face darkened. They didn't stop, she said, her voice heavy with pain. A month later, my store got hit with an audit, found thousands in missing cash. I swear I never touched it, but the books pinned it on me. Next thing I know, I'm in court, sentenced to 8 years for embezzlement. She paused, her fingers trembling. In prison, I got word they stripped my parental rights. My Wyatt was gone, taken by his grandparents. She choked out, her eyes glistening. Wyatt's mind reeled. His grandparents, George and Evelyn, had raised him, claiming his mom was long gone. Had they lied? Set her up? He swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. Where'd you go after that? He asked, his voice tight. Lorraine sighed. I tried rebuilding. Got married again to a kind man, Thomas, out in Joliet. But we couldn't have kids. And when he passed, I fell apart, she said, her voice breaking. Moved to Peoria. Worked at a diner. Then a fire took my trailer, faulty wiring, I lost everything. She leaned back, her voice quieter. Someone offered me a job in Chicago, sewing at a factory with housing. Sounded perfect, but it was a scam. They locked us in a basement, took our IDs, made us work for nothing. I got sick and they dumped me on the street. Been homeless since, about 3 years now. I crash in an old warehouse by the Chicago River. Your janitor, Hannah, she's been sneaking me food. Don't be hard on her, please. Wyatt's throat tightened. Her story mirrored his life too closely. Ethan's death, a son named Wyatt, even the in-laws' names. His childhood longing for his mom battled his grown-up skepticism. He wanted to blurt out, I'm your son. But doubt gnawed at him. What if she was mistaken, or worse, playing him? He studied her weary eyes, seeing no deceit, just exhaustion. I need to confirm something, he said, standing abruptly. Stay here. He grabbed the coffee mug Lorraine had used, told Hannah to pack her a to-go bag of food, including Italian beef sandwiches, and rushed to his office, his mind a storm of hope and fear. Wyatt stormed into his office at the Windy Fork, a framed photo of the bean on his desk, clutching Lorraine's coffee mug like it held the key to his past. His heart pounded as he sealed it in a Ziploc bag, grabbing a spoon she'd used for good measure. Sarah, a server cleaning nearby, froze, her eyes wide. Wyatt, you okay? She asked, clutching a tray. Just stay there, he snapped, his voice tight with urgency. Without explaining, he bolted out, heading straight for Northwestern's genetic testing center. Lorraine's story, her son Wyatt, her husband, his late father, Ethan, the bread saying, had cracked open a wound he thought he'd buried. He needed proof. That night, Wyatt sat in his Evanston home, the glow of Lake Michigan through the window, and spilled everything to his wife, Lily. Her eyes softened, but her jaw tightened when he mentioned his grandparents. You know, Wyatt, I always suspected they weren't as sweet as you thought, she said, sipping her wine. What do you mean? He asked, leaning forward. They didn't like me at first. Called me a gold digger. Said I was chasing your North Side money. I kept quiet so you wouldn't fight with them, Lily confessed. Wyatt's stomach churned. They said that? Why didn't you tell me? He demanded, his voice shaking. Lily shrugged. They were your family. I didn't want to hurt you. Besides, they're gone now, she said, her tone steady but heavy. Wyatt's mind spun. If George and Evelyn had trashed Lily, Could they have framed Lorraine, his own mom, to steal him away? The thought made his chest ache. For days he paced the windy fork, glancing out windows, hoping Lorraine would return. He cornered Hannah, the janitor. "If you see that woman again, call me right away," he said, his tone softer now. "I won't bite your head off, I promise." Hannah nodded, relieved. "Will do, Wyatt," she replied. Waiting for the DNA results felt like torture. Wyatt couldn't focus. Every clink of a plate, every laugh from the dining room grated on him. When the lab envelope finally arrived, his hands shook as he tore it open. The words hit like a freight train. Lorraine was his mother. At 50, Wyatt had found the woman he'd mourned as dead. He sat, staring at the lake, imagining Lorraine's smile. Shock gave way to a fierce need to help her, to make up for lost years. But Lorraine was gone. She hadn't returned to the restaurant, and Hannah hadn't seen her by the Chicago River warehouse. Wyatt's hope dimmed, but he refused to give up. He called the Chicago PD, checked shelters, even hospitals, describing Lorraine's worn coat and silver hair. Weeks dragged on, each dead end a punch to the gut. Then, a call from John H. Stroger, Jr., Hospital. "We've got a homeless woman here," a nurse said, her tone clipped. "Hit by a car near a CTA stop, bad shape." Wyatt's heart leapt. "Is her name Lorraine?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No ID, but she matches your description," the nurse replied. Wyatt grabbed his keys, praying he wasn't too late to save the mom he'd just found. Wyatt raced through Chicago's bustling streets, his SUV weaving past honking cabs in spring rain toward John H. Stroger, Jr. Hospital. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, as he replayed Lorraine's story in his head. The DNA test had confirmed she was his mom, but now she was fighting for her life. The nurse's words echoed. "Hit by a car near a CTA stop, bad shape." Wyatt prayed he'd make it in time. At the hospital, Nurse Carla pointed him to a ward buzzing with overworked staff. "She's down there," she said, barely looking up. No tuberculosis, but the crash broke her ribs and leg. Surgery helped, but without pricey meds, she won't last long. Wyatt's heart sank. "Take me to her, now," he demanded, his voice urgent. He stepped into the room and saw her, Lorraine, his mom, lying frail on a stiff hospital bed. Her face was pale, bruised, but those eyes, even through pain, sparked with the warmth he remembered from childhood. He gently touched her hand, his voice cracking. "Mom, it's me! Wyatt!" Carla gasped, muttering, "This guy's mom!" Lorraine's eyes fluttered open, confused. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice dry as sandpaper. "I'm your son," Wyatt said, tears welling. "We met at my restaurant, the Windy Fork. I got the DNA test. It's you, Mom." Lorraine's brow furrowed, sweat beading on her forehead. "My Wyatt? No, can't be," she murmured, her voice trembling. She tried to sit up, wincing, then collapsed back. Her trembling hand reached for his. Slowly, recognition dawned. "You look like Ethan," she murmured. "My boy." Wyatt pulled out the DNA results, reading them aloud, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. Lorraine's eyes widened, tears spilling. "I thought I'd lost you forever," she sobbed. "I looked for you, Wyatt. After prison I tried, but they hid you." Wyatt squeezed her hand. "I know, Mom. I know everything now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That bread saying," Lorraine said, a weak smile breaking through. "You remembered it, didn't you? From when I'd patch you up after you fell off your bike in Garfield Park." Wyatt nodded, choking back a sob. "I never forgot you. I thought you were gone, but you're here," he said, his eyes shining. "I'm too far gone," she whispered, her voice faint. "Not happening," Wyatt said fiercely. "I found you, and I'm not losing you again. I'll get you the best care. You're coming home." Wyatt didn't hesitate. He called Northwestern, Chicago's top hospital, and arranged to transfer Lorraine. He paid for the best surgeons and meds, determined to give her a fighting chance. Weeks later, her condition stabilized. Wyatt brought Lily, Ethan Jr. and Olivia to meet her, planning a picnic by Lake Michigan. The family embraced Lorraine, welcoming her with open hearts. Ethan Jr. cracked jokes, Olivia shared stories of college, and Lily promised home-cooked Chicago-style deep-dish pizza. Lorraine, weak but smiling, soaked in the love she'd missed for decades. Wyatt watched, his heart full, knowing his mom was finally home.